Okay, so welcome to the third in our Bright Stars Spotlight series. I'm Kirsten Bartlett, one of the founders and managing directors of the Granted Group. We're proud to be showcasing stories of Australia's amazing researchers who also happen to be women. We want to be able to encourage young women and girls to pursue careers in research, but also inspire women already in the sector to keep striving for those senior appointments. Today, we're chatting to Dr. Celia Harris, who is a cognitive scientist and Vice Chancellor's Senior Research Fellow at the Marks Institute for Brain, Behaviour and Development at Western Sydney University. Celia earned her PhD in Cognitive Science at Macquarie University and was appointed postdoctoral research fellow at the Centre of Autobiographical Memory Research at Aarhus University in Denmark. In 2012, she returned to Macquarie University as a Macquarie University Research Fellow and then as a successful ARC DECRA recipient. Celia studies autobiographical memory and ways of supporting it across the lifespan. Thank you so much for joining me today, Celia.
Thank you. I hope we're not going to get too interrupted by my dogs barking in the background there, but we'll see.
It's nice.
Yes.
It's nice to have my dog's normally barking in the background as well. Okay, so first of all, the question that I'd like to start off with is, can you tell me a bit about your research, and also can you tell me why it's important?
Yep, sure. So I'm interested in memory. So that is how we go about remembering the events of our lives, how we experience our life, and how we're able to bring those events back to mind when we want to. So I'm interested in the sort of cognitive psychology of that, how it is that we do that difficult task of retrieving memories. But I'm also interested in how that individual memory retrieval interacts with the environment. So particularly how we remember in social groups, how we remember in conversations with other people, how we remember in interaction with tools, technologies, and resources. So I'm interested in sort of taking that quite individual sort of cognitive internal understanding of our memory and seeing how we can use that to understand how our memory might interact with the environment. So I've done quite a bit of research on, how we remember in groups, how we are able to retrieve things in conversation with others, particularly our families, or remembering in couples. So how we can use other people as kind of memory resources to make retrieval easier. And it's important for a few reasons. One main one is, as you alluded to, I'm interested in how we can use this knowledge to support memory, to help people remember when they might be finding it hard. So the sort of foundational work that I've done, understanding memory retrieval processes, how they work in interaction with other people, can then be put to work in settings like aged care, dementia care, to help people who might be having memory problems. So some of the basic work that I've done right now, I'm now transforming into projects that are being conducted in those more applied settings. So in residential aged care, for instance, to see how we can make memory easier for people who really need the support.
Wonderful. And of course, issues around dementia and Alzheimer's and those kind of conditions have become more and more prevalent and more studied over the last decade or so. So it does seem that the work that you're doing is very relevant in, as you say, in those aged care settings and in trying to solve some of those big issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, coming at it from as an autobiographical memory expert, it just reminds us how important it is. Memory only works in connection with our own personal history and our own personal reminders and our own personal cues, right? So it reminds us that, any sort of programs or interventions that are done to support memory need to come back to an individual's autobiography. They need to connect with what's meaningful and important for that person. And that's sort of a really big challenge for science, because that idiosyncrasy, and that's my puppy. The individual nature of it is really challenging. It's hard to get, good controlled studies that, work the same for every single person. But yeah, it's the most important part.
Wonderful. Excellent. Okay. And it's no problem about the dog. This is the joy of our Zoom experience. Okay. So you've been in the gig now for a little while. Would you like to tell me a little bit about what your advice would be to, say, a young woman who's considering a career in research? What are the key things that you think that person should think about?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I'm always wary of giving too much advice, because I think sometimes, there's kind of survivor bias in academia. It's like, follow my path and you will, have an outcome like mine. So yeah, I mean, I think when I reflect on the main things that have helped me or supported me through my career, my number one advice is get mentors and surround yourself by a team of supporters and advocates and people who are in your corner. And I think about that, really in terms of a team. So I think one really important aspect of mentoring that we often forget is that you kind of think, I need one mentor, I need one big famous person who's going to be the person who facilitates my career. And often mentoring programs are kind of set up like that too. It's like, we'll pair you with one person, the mentor. And in my experience, it doesn't really work like that. So I think what you need and what you need to seek out is a team of people, a team of supporters, people who can help you with different aspects of your career. So you might have a mentor for research, you might have a mentor for research methods, you might have somebody who helps you just craft the emails where you want to say no to stuff, or you might have somebody who helps you get your baby to sleep, so I think you need a team of supporters and, all kinds of people for all kinds of different roles. They don't need to be big famous people. They can be friends, they can be peers, but just seeking out that network of supporters. And I think for me, it's been the most critical aspect of my career.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And I think, this issue around, do we have to have a formal mentoring program, and in the absence of that, nothing. You're spot on. I think seeking out and being proactive about finding those people is so important. And often the most influential people are the ones that have been informal, haven't been allocated to you as part of a program, but you've collected all of those wonderful people along the way.
Absolutely. And I think, the other thing to know if you're just starting out is that people are really open to this. So, if somebody would just drop me an email and say, can we have a coffee and chat about this or that, or, writing a grant application or writing for the conversation, I would always say yes. And it doesn't need to be a forever relationship. It doesn't need to be high stakes. We can just have a coffee and a chat about that one thing and see how it goes, so I think just treating it casually and kind of just collecting your network of people along the way.
Excellent advice. Thank you. All right, very last question then. If you hadn't ended up as a researcher doing all of this wonderful work, what do you think you might have done?
Yeah, that's a funny one too, and it's kind of helpful, I guess, that my dogs have been barking here in the background because I actually live on a farm. So if you listen closely, you might even hear roosters crowing and sheep baaing somewhere back there.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about this too, and the funny part is that I guess I've always been interested in science ever since I was little. So the very first job I ever wanted, when I was in kindergarten, I remember telling my teacher I was going to be an entomologist, and I was really into bugs. And she kind of laughed, and I remember being quite distraught that my teacher had mocked this, my passion for bugs. But anyway, I guess from coming from a 5-year-old, it just sounded funny. So yeah, I've always been interested in science, always. And even when I first started uni, I thought I was going to be a forensic scientist. I was watching a lot of X-Files. So the psychology kind of happened along the way. So I would say probably if I was going to be something else, I might be a vet with the farm and the animals and the science and all.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And I'm sure that your prep teacher was surprised that a 5-year-old could say entomologist as well. So happy that was where the laughing came from.
I think so. I think that's what my mum tried to tell me afterwards when I recounted the story, that maybe she wasn't laughing at me so much as, surprised. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Well, look, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your world, the kind of work that you're doing in autobiographical memory. It's so interesting. And I think, as we talked about earlier in this interview, it's one of those issues that is so prevalent today. And we are so grateful that we've got people like you, Celia, who are working hard to try and solve some of the mysteries of our brains. Thank you so much for joining me today. And that is the end of our lovely interview with Dr. Celia Harris.
Thanks, Kirsten.